You do not know what is called horror. You don't know what is called suffering. But if you knew that, you will definitely watching this video with tears in your eyes. I certainly don't know your personal life experience, but I know one thing is that nothing that a child who has been sexually abused by adults could have suffered, who have used him as an object, is comparable. Those adults who use it like a rag. Put yourself in the place of a child who sees his intimate orifices being punctured and wrapped by objects under the abject pressure of adult force. Put yourself in the place of a child who sees the trust he has given to the world of grown-ups disappear. It is his own father, his own mother who exerts sexual violence on him. This is called suffering. When it does not end horribly in death, when it continues for years, when no one reacts, when adults make fun of a child while he begs them to spare him, and that they exchange him among themselves like common merchandise. Little child, little helpless being. And that they use him so much that the child forgets his own name, that he no longer knows if he is a girl or a boy, if it is hot or cold, until he no longer has the possibility of claiming a future. They give him a new name for a classification number, a code, like a common flower pot among 1,000. It's horror, it's pain, it's hell. Today we are going to discuss the case of one of these witnesses of the horror, who is not the victim, no, but who is the executioner, and who will tell you about the abuse that this infected word affixes to children. Don't look away. Don't turn off your extension. Pay attention to what might happen to your children, and you will understand why, if you do not pray and work hard for the spreading of the gospel of the kingdom, the end will not come.
The story you're about to hear is so shocking, so unbelievable, that your mind is going to struggle to allow you to accept that things like this exist. But they do.
Sadistic sex offender, as he'll tell us, he is sexually aroused by inflicting pain. The victim he's describing is his 9-year-old stepson.
After about 2 years of molesting my son and all the pornography that I had been buying, renting, swapping, I had gotten my hands on some bondage and discipline pornography with children involved. And some of the reading that I had done and the pictures that I had seen showed total submission, forcing the children to do what I wanted. And I had eventually started using some of this bondage and discipline with my own son. And it had escalated to the point where I was putting a large Ziploc bag over his head and taping it around his neck with black duct tape, or black electrical tape, and raping and molesting him at that point, to the point that he would turn blue, pass out, At that point, I would rip the bag off his head, not for fear of hurting him, but because of the excitement. I was extremely aroused by inflicting pain. And when I seen him pass out and change colors, that was very arousing and heightening to me. And I would rip the bag off his head, and then I'd jump up on his chest and I'd masturbate in his face and make him suck my penis while he was, as he started to come back awake. While he was coughing and choking, I would rape him in the mouth. I used the same sadistic styled act of the plastic bag and the tape 2-3 times a week, and that went on for, I'd say, a little over a year. If I hadn't been arrested when I was, my stepson would be dead. I would have killed him. I had been fantasizing about killing a victim during the course of rape or molest about 5 or 6 months, all during the course of the molestation of my stepson when I was using the Ziploc or the plastic bag over his head. I had fantasized and thought about killing him, letting him go ahead and suffocate during the process of the molestation. I believe it would have been maybe as short as another month or 2, and I would have actually killed him if I was not arrested.
Some clients own their own island or a big piece of land, and they would buy us just to hunt us. Some laid traps for us, and others would track us down like animals. It was important never to be the one captured first because you didn't want to appear like you weren't playing the game. You would be punished. It's one of the scariest things clients ever had me do.
It was reported to my wife and my parents, probably 6 or 7 different times. And there was actually one instance where I went to the police station myself to turn myself in. And the officer at the desk told me to go home and sleep off my drunk. And I left. If it wasn't for the fact that my landlord had found some pornographic pictures of my son in the attic of the home where we were living, I would probably still be molesting. I've been raping and molesting for over a period of 25 years, and I have in excess of 300 victims.
Hands-on victims?
All hands-on victims.
Okay. How did you get access to so many victims?
Children are on the street all the time. I created my own opportunities. There were children at stores. I had picked some children up at the stores, at the penny arcades, and I have snatched some off the street.
Now, by pick them up, do you mean by grooming? You talk them into it, or do you mean violently grab them and kidnap them?
Sometimes there had been some violent kidnapping, snatching a child off the street, pulling him into my car, taking him to a deserted area, raping and molesting him, and then taking him back to where I had snatched him from. There had been instances where I would groom the child with toys, money. I'd see a child in a store standing around the toy displays, and I would offer to buy the toy that this child may be looking at, and would actually walk up to the counter and pay for the toy and walk out of the store with the child and the toy. And then I would, after I had taken the child to a deserted area or a house that I had actually fixed up for the purpose of raping and molesting children, I would take the child back to the store where I had got him from and leave him off at the front door and leave.
On the outside, her clients were pillars of their communities. But behind closed doors, she says they were sinister and evil human beings.
And these children end up becoming monsters because they are between a few months and a few decades old. when their bodies are deformed by regular beatings, by confinement, by forced famines, repeated raps. They are alone in front of one or more adults in front of cameras, often to be sold as pornographic actors who would have signed for this world lace. There will be the executioners of others to make them suffer also when they are adults. Have you ever wondered how LGBT manhood is made? How to become homosexual, transsexual, bisexual, non-gendered, non-binary? It is simply through an ID. The ideas are both fantastic and destructive. If an idea is not in a good concept, it will destroy the one who emits it, those to whom he will say it, by tens, hundreds, thousands, millions and billions. Many of those who today declare coming out still have a small history of mistreatment or supracognitive imitation of something they saw or experienced when they were young, and it is very often linked to trauma, resulting from minor and severe abuse of all kinds. It can be verbal, like you act like a girl. It can be physical, with blows, and go very far with violence of various kinds on the child. I'm sure that's what's going to happen to this man's beautiful son. If he is still alive and has not been able to deal with the consequences of these horrible events.
I believe I feel more that I led a triple life. I was one way at home, I was one way at work, and I was a different way in the community. When I was at home, I was a molesting monster. I would rape and molest. When I was in the community, I was more of a stalker. I would be stalking people, stalking children, looking for victims. When I was more with my employers or the in crowd that I was in, it was something, I was completely different as, I'm the perfect individual, have a good paying job, drive a nice car, dress nice, and go to a lot of high class, fancy places. And this is the life, this is what I would portray to the people that I wanted them to see. My friends, my employers, business associates. This is what I would portray to them. What people didn't know about going on in my home was a lot of extreme violence. Beating my son up, beating my wife up. If my wife wouldn't have sex with me when I wanted it, where I wanted, or how I wanted it, I would beat her up and then rape her after I'd beat her. I had beaten my son into unconsciousness a number of times. And then I would keep him, sometimes kept locked up in the house until his bruises healed up. Keep him away from school, keeping him away from his friends. Nobody around me knew what I was doing. Nobody around my community knew that I was such a violent individual in the home. If they did, they never said anything. But I don't believe they ever knew, because I was completely and totally different outside of the house once I left the home. Well, I devalued all children, both step-in biological children and others' children. Mostly others and my stepchild. I told myself that my stepchild, because he wasn't mine, because he wasn't my biological son, that he was less than human anyway. Other people's children that I had raped and molested, they weren't mine. They weren't my biological children, so it didn't make any difference to me. I viewed children as a piece of meat. Just, to me, children were a toy. Do what I wanted with and then throw it away. The thinking process that I used it with pain and how arousing I found it was if a child was screaming, I would tell myself that, it's the child's not really hurting, because I know in all reality I know I was hurting the child. But the only way that I could continue the act was to tell myself that I wasn't hurting the child. I really wasn't hurting him or her. And I found the more I told myself that, the more I believed it. And then I found that if the child tried to pull away or would scream, holler, cry, and all my lying to myself would enhance that and make it more arousing to me. And the pain, the aspect of inflicting pain was extremely arousing. It was something that had taken time to build up. It didn't just happen. It took time to build that up. And after a while, I could actually take and turn it around to the child was screaming because they wanted more. The child was screaming actually because they liked it. The child was screaming because they wanted me to continue. And it's all turning it around and saying that well, the tears really aren't real for hurt. The screaming isn't really because of pain. It's that the person actually wants this to happen. And that's how I was turning it around. And I had told myself this so many times that I believed it.
Now, did you do that at the time, or did you rework it in your mind later?
When I first found that I was really aroused to inflicting pain, I didn't have to work. I didn't have that line of thinking right then. Okay, I knew that I was hurting them. It took me some time, and I worked it through at a later time. I'd work it over half hour, 45 minutes, hour and a half later, that this child was asking for it. This child wanted more. And the more that I thought about it that way, the more that I looked at it, there came a point in my life after 6-7 months of doing this that I didn't even have to change the thought process anymore. The immediate thought process was scream, pain, excitement. They wanted it. There was no change after that. I had told myself so much that I had built it into it. It was a built-in thinking process at that point, that child was crying, screaming, because they wanted me to inflict the pain, no matter how much I hurt them. There were incidents and cases where tissue had been torn, blood, and I know there was pain, but I had no remorse for it. I didn't feel sorry for it. I was aroused to that. And the child screaming made the arousal even higher.
It's obvious that this
At the time, I didn't have any feelings for anybody other than myself. I wanted me to feel good, and it didn't make a difference who hurt in the process as long as I felt good. I was very apathetic. I had very little feelings for anybody. At that point in my life, I don't think I had empathy for anybody, including myself. I'm not even sure I knew what empathy was at that point. I didn't care about other people's feelings. I didn't care for other people, period.
This is the end. You saw this Jerald, who has horrible practices towards children, and you saw the connection to Kendall's story about the abuse process. We therefore realized that it is learned to mistreat a child. We decided not to comment too much this time and let you see with your eyes what we tell you every day. If you have looked closely at these two people, you will see that they are emotionless when they talk about horrible things. It is about MK Ultra programming, and we'll talk about that in the next video. In the meantime, subscribe on all NBN platforms and do not miss the teachings every day that allows you to be among those who bring the kingdom to the earth. I salute you, and I know that we will meet again at the top where the eagles have their home. Bye bye.